The door rattles on its hinges. Outside, under a swollen, blood-red moon, a shadow paces in the dirt. Claws drag across wood, breath steams in the cold, and the villagers huddle inside with iron blades and sprigs of wolfsbane. When the howl comes, it is not the sound of a wild animal, but of a man's voice caught halfway between speech and beast. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Drop it in the comments. If you're into this kind of deep dive, tap like and subscribe. The legend of the werewolf is one of our oldest cultural nightmares. A man cursed to transform into a wolf, prowling by moonlight, hunting flesh and only killed by silver. This is the story we know, the tale you've seen on the screen in films from The Wolfman in 1941 to An American Werewolf in London in 1981. But the roots run much deeper than Hollywood, deeper than Gothic pamphlets or medieval courts. They reach back 3,000 years, to the clay tablets of Mesopotamia and the smoke-choked rituals of Mount Lykaion in Greece. Why does it matter? Because the werewolf is not just a monster, it is a mirror. Every time the tale was told, it reflected what a society feared most: wilderness, disease, betrayal, or even its own appetite for forbidden flesh. Understanding this legend is like holding up a shard of glass to human history. Picture this: the Epic of Gilgamesh, written in the 2nd millennium before Christ, long before Europe dreamed of castles or knights. In Tablet 6, the goddess Ishtar takes a mortal lover, a shepherd, but when his loyalty falters, she curses him. You shall be a wolf. He is driven away by his own dogs, hunted, marked forever. Here, at the dawn of literature, is the first clear transformation of man into wolf. Andrew George's 2003 translation preserves that chilling moment. 3,000 years ago, the werewolf had already stepped into the human imagination, and then, centuries later, in the writings of Herodotus, another clue. The Nuri, a tribe of the Scythian steppe. Each year, he claims, they become wolves for a few days. Was it a metaphor for a seasonal ritual, a misunderstood shamanic trance, or was it a genuine story of people believed to shed their skins? Whatever it was, the Greek historian fixed the idea of periodic wolf transformation into recorded memory. That was the 5th century before Christ, 2,455 years ago. But here's where it gets strange. By Plato's time, the werewolf was not just an exotic curiosity but a moral parable. In the Republic, he whispers of a man who tastes human flesh at the rites of Zeus Lykaion. The punishment is transformation wolfhood for 9 years. Here, cannibalism, taboo, and animality are bound together in a single act of horror. To eat the wrong flesh is to become inhuman. To cross the boundary is to lose your skin. The Romans carried it forward. Pliny the Elder, writing in the 1st century after Christ, repeats Arcadian stories of versipels, literally turn skins. Petronius, in his satirical Satyricon, makes it darker and stranger. A soldier urinates in a circle, strips naked, and becomes a wolf by moonlight near a graveyard. These tales smelled of death, of liminality, border places where the world of the living thinned. By the medieval period, the werewolf wore new clothes, literally. In the French Bisclaveret, a nobleman confides that he is cursed to turn wolf only if his clothes are hidden. His wife betrays him, steals the garments, and leaves him trapped in fur. It's not hunger or curse that damns him, it's betrayal. Marie de France, writing in the 12th century, made the werewolf a victim as much as a beast. And in the frozen north, sagas carried the wolfskin into the forest. The Völsunga saga tells of Sigmundur and his kin, donning wolf pelts and howling through the trees until they were as wolves in every way. Here, wolfhood was not curse but chosen skin, a cloak of power. Across every culture, across every century, the werewolf reappears, shifting, adapting, becoming. But if the story has lived for 3,000 years, what secret does it hold that we have yet to face? Because here's the question. Why does humanity keep returning to this image? A man half-beast, trapped between worlds, cursed to hunger. In the next section, we'll pull back the curtain. From Mesopotamian clay to medieval parchment, we'll trace the earliest attestations, the shifting names, and the paths by which the werewolf spread like wildfire across continents. And what we'll uncover is stranger than fiction because the werewolf was never just one story, but many. The desert wind whips through ruined walls of clay. Buried beneath them lie tablets pressed with wedge-shaped signs, the first written whisper of a human-turned wolf. Thousands of miles away and centuries later, monks bend over parchment, copying tales of men cursed to fur and fangs. The werewolf legend has travelled, transformed, and survived. Why track this trail? Because by mapping how the story spread, who carried it, who reshaped it, who silenced it, we see not just the werewolf, but the transmission of fear itself across civilizations. It begins with the Epic of Gilgamesh, carved in Mesopotamian cuneiform around 1100 to 700 years before Christ. Ishtar curses her shepherd lover to become a wolf. He loses not only his human body, but his place in society. His flocks turn against him. This is no fairy tale. It is a divine punishment etched into humanity's earliest epic. Andrew George's translation in 2003 makes clear the brutality of that transformation. Fast forward to the Greek world. Herodotus, the father of history, writes in the 5th century before Christ of the Neuri, a tribe on the Scythian frontier. He insists they turn into wolves once a year for a few days. Whether true or traveller's gossip, his histories fixed the notion of seasonal lycanthropy into European memory. Imagine the impact. A respected historian placing the werewolf not in myth but in ethnography. By the time of Plato, around 380 before Christ, the tale deepens. He tells of a man who, at Zeus Lycaon's rites, tastes human flesh. The penalty, 9 years as a wolf. This is not mere folklore. It is philosophy, a parable on morality and the beast within. Cannibalism is the transgression. Wolfhood is the consequence. The Romans inherit and amplify these whispers. Pliny the Elder, in the 1st century after Christ, catalogues them in his natural history. He uses the Latin term versipellis, meaning turned skin. This word captures the heart of transformation, shedding one identity, taking another. Around the same time, Petronius crafts a lurid tale in the Satyricon. A soldier urinates a circle, sheds his clothes, and becomes a wolf under the moon. The grotesque imagery is almost cinematic, a Roman campfire story about the liminal space between man and beast. Then comes Pausanias, the Greek traveller writing in the 2nd century after Christ. He describes Mount Lykaion, where Zeus was worshipped with ancient rites. If a man partook of human flesh there, he would become a wolf for 9 years. Archaeological work on the mountain has indeed uncovered a long-used ash altar with remains animal for certain human debated. Romano and Voyatz's excavations in 2014 through 2016 confirm the longevity of this site. Ritual, cannibalism and wolfhood were bound tightly together. Centuries pass, empires fall, yet the werewolf persists. By the 12th century, the Norman courts hear a different tune. Marie de France, the first woman poet of the French court, tells the story of Bisclaveret. Here, the wolf is noble, wronged by his treacherous wife who steals his clothes, trapping him in fur. It is a lie of betrayal, not savagery. The beast is not villain but victim. A century later in Iceland, the Völsunga saga imagines wolfhood as a choice. Sigmunda and Sinfjotli discover enchanted wolfskins. They put them on and become wolves, attacking travellers until their fury nearly destroys them. The motif is strikingly different. The wolfskin cloak as a martial tool, not a curse. These stories are not isolated. They are connected by the channels of transmission. Roman encyclopedias preserved Pliny's and Petronius's fragments. Monastic scriptoria recopied them. From there, medieval romance writers reshaped them for courts. Early modern pamphleteers in the 16th century turned them into lurid trial reports. Peter Stubbe in 1589, Gilles Garnier in 1573. Each retelling carried forward older strands, recombining them for new fears. But here's the thread worth tugging. At every stage, someone was editing. The church's penitentials around the 11th century warned that belief in shapeshifting was heresy, an illusion of the devil. Later, children's editions of Bisclaveret softened the edges, cutting out adultery, mutilation, betrayal. The werewolf became sanitized for young ears. What was once a tale of ritual, taboo, and treachery was reshaped into a simple fable. And yet, the beast slipped through. From clay to parchment, from ash altar to print shop, the werewolf endured. Which raises a sharper question. Can a myth this persistent be pinned down to a single type, a single code, in the great catalogue of folklore? In the next section, we'll turn to classification. We'll map the werewolf against the ATU tale types and Thompson's motif index, run the numbers on age, and uncover what the data reveals about why this legend is one of humanity's oldest surviving nightmares. A man strips off his cloak and vanishes into the trees. A woman hides her husband's clothes, and suddenly her marriage becomes a prison. A soldier's urine steams on cold ground, sealing a circle that turns him into a predator. These images seem scattered, wild, but beneath them lies a pattern, one that folklorists have tried to trap in nets of classification. Why does this matter? Because only by mapping these recurring structures, the tale types, motifs, and transformations, can we see how the werewolf is not one tale, but a web of human anxieties stretching back 3,000 years. Let's start with the age math. The Epic of Gilgamesh, Tablet 6, gives us the earliest secure reference, Ishtar, transforming her lover into a wolf. That dates between 1100 and 700 years before Christ, 2,700 to 3,100 years ago. Call it 3,000 years even, and the title of this investigation holds true. Herodotus's Scythian werewolves, around 430 before Christ, are roughly 2,455 years old today. These are not late inventions, they are ancient. Now, how do folklorists classify them? The Arne Thompson-Euther Index, the great catalogue of international tales, doesn't grant werewolves a neat, single box. Instead, they slip across categories. The transformation itself aligns with ATU motifs 400, 400 and 59, especially those about supernatural spouses and betrayal. Marie de France's Bisclaveret is a classic. A wife hides her husband's garments, and without them he cannot regain his human form. This is the same soul skin motif found in Swan Maiden and Selkie tales. Stith Thompson's motif, Dun 113 man transformed into animal, is the broad umbrella. Narrow it, and you find Dun 113.1, transformation into wolf. Another strand is D671, shapeshifting by donning animal skin. Visible in Norse sagas where enchanted pelts grant wolfhood. These codes reveal the connective tissue between stories told centuries and continents apart. The words themselves betray their own lineage. The English werewolf comes from Old English were, meaning man, joined with wolf. Spoken aloud, it carried the weight of fear, wera.wolf. In Rome, the word was versipellis, literally, turn skin. It spoke not only of wolves, but of any shapeshifter, a chilling suggestion that identity itself could be shed like a garment. The Greeks coined lycanthropos, wolfman, an idea that passed down to modern psychiatry as lycanthropy, the delusion of becoming a wolf. In France, the monster became loup-garou, a tautological wolf-werewolf. And in the Slavic East, vukodlak, volkodlak, varkolak, blended wolf with hair or skin, sometimes shading into vampire lore. Names, like pelts, carried the curse across frontiers. But here's where the data sparks. Folklorist Claude Lecouteux once pointed out that the werewolf narrative consistently revolves around liminality, boundaries crossed, skins lost, thresholds violated. The missing garment is never just cloth. It is the soul skin, the essence of humanity. Strip it away, and the person is trapped in bestial form. This logic is older than Marie de France. It underpins rituals at Lykaion, where consuming taboo flesh erased the boundary between man and beast. And then there is the material counterforce, silver. By the 19th century, silver bullets had become the canonical antidote, but dig earlier, and you find iron, prayer, and herbs like wolfsbane listed as defences. Why silver? Because in many cultures, silver was the civilizing metal, bright, incorruptible, resistant to tarnish. To kill the beast with silver was to restore order with purity. Baring Gould's studies in 1865 trace how silver shifted from general magical protection to the specific anti-wolf weapon. So, the numbers and codes tell us this. The werewolf is not a single fairy tale, but a bundle of motifs, taboo flesh, missing clothes, animal pelts, cursed bites. Each society selected the motif that embodied its fear. For Mesopotamians, it was divine wrath. For Greeks, ritual pollution. For medieval courts, marital betrayal. For early modern villagers, crime and famine, which raises a sharper point. If every culture bent the wolf shape to its own dread, then how far did these echoes travel? Could distant peoples, with no contact, still arrive at the same nightmare a human condemned to wear a wolf's face? In the next section, we'll turn outward. From Norse Ulfhevnar to Slavic Varkalak, from Iberian Lobisomum to the Celtic Wulva, we'll chase the trail of the wolf across continents. And what emerges is not one beast, but a pack. A frozen forest in Iceland, a Breton hall lit by beeswax candles, a Balkan graveyard where the ground heaves under eclipsed moonlight. The werewolf doesn't stay in one place. It crosses borders as easily as it crosses the line between man and beast. Why does this matter? Because when we step back, we see that werewolves aren't just European nightmares, they are part of a global pattern of wolfhood, different names, different curses, but the same shadowy outline. Take the Norse sagas. The Völsunga saga, written around 1250, describes Sigmundur and his son donning wolfskins. These enchanted pelts give them the strength, rage, and hunger of wolves. They raid travellers, kill too many, and nearly destroy each other. Here, wolfhood is not a punishment but a martial costume, an echo of the Ulfhethnar, wolf-coated warriors described by later scholars like Hilda Davidson in 1993. These were warriors who fought in trance states, half in this world, half in another, wearing the wolf's power into battle. Move south to the Celtic fringe. In 12th century Brittany and Normandy, lays like Bisclaveret and Melion tell of noblemen betrayed into wolf shape by their wives. These tales stress identity, honour, and marital loyalty, recasting the wolf as a wronged knight rather than a savage. Scholars like Richner in 1966 have shown how these stories circulated in aristocratic courts, shaping how the elite imagined the beast within. Shift eastward to the Slavic and Balkan lands. The Vukodlak or Varkalak is not just a wolf, it is a hybrid of werewolf and vampire. Some traditions claimed they prowled graveyards. Others said they swallowed the sun or moon during eclipses. Unlike the French wolf of betrayal or the Norse wolf of war, the Balkan wolf was cosmic, tied to cycles of death and rebirth. Kremnitz in 1884 and later Barber in 1988 documented how these figures overlapped with vampiric lore, making them more feared than pitied. In Iberia and Latin America, the wolf wore yet another skin. The lobisomem of Portugal and Brazil, or the lobison of Paraguay, often appeared as a curse upon the seventh son. Born unlucky, he was doomed to roam as a beast on certain nights, expiating his family's sins. Cascudo, in 1954, noted how these tales mixed Catholic notions of penance with local traditions of nocturnal wanderers. The wolf here was hereditary fate, not just mischance. And then there is the Shetland Isles, where the wolver was said to haunt the coastline. Unlike its murderous cousins, this wolfman was benign, fishing alone on rocks, sometimes leaving food for poor families. Jesse Saxby recorded it in 1932, though later folklorists like Willem de Blecourt in 2014 suggested it may have been a modern invention rather than a genuine medieval survival. Still, the figure of the gentle werewolf refuses to die. What connects these variations is not just the wolf, but the way the wolf is used as metaphor. In the north, it was fury and martial trance. In France, betrayal and nobility undone. In the Balkans, apocalyptic hunger. In Latin America, cursed bloodlines. Each echoes a core human fear, losing control, losing trust, losing place in the cosmos, or losing innocence at birth. Transmission mattered too. Saga manuscripts moved along Hanseatic trade routes. French lay crossed into England with Norman nobles. Slavic vampire wolf tales spread through ecclesiastical channels, as priests condemned them in sermons. Early modern print culture pamphlets and woodcuts blew local werewolf trials into pan-European news. Zika's 2007 study shows how print sensationalism turned regional horrors into continental myth. But here's the twist. Not all cultures embrace the same trigger. Today, we imagine the full moon as the universal switch. Yet few medieval sources specify lunar phases. That link is mostly modern, crystallized in the 20th century through films like Universal's The Wolf Man. The folkloric wolf was more flexible. Pelts, curses, betrayal, ritual, or birth. The moon was just one mask among many. So if werewolves vary so wildly across geography, is there a deeper thread binding them all? The answer lies not just in stories, but in symbols, the skin, the blood, the silver. To decode the werewolf, we need to look at what these objects meant in ritual and culture. In the next section, we'll strip the tale to its symbolic bones. Why does the stolen garment matter? Why does silver kill? Why does the wolf always stand at the edge of forest and firelight? These aren't just details, they're the keys to the legend's power. The wolf waits at the threshold. Not inside the firelight, not entirely gone into the trees, but hovering on the edge. That's where the werewolf lives in liminal space. And every detail of its story, from missing garments to silver bullets, encodes this tension between wilderness and civilization. Why focus on symbols? Because the objects that appear in these stories, clothing, metals, blood, are not decoration. They are ritual keys. Decode them, and the 3,000-year-old secret behind the werewolf begins to emerge. Take the missing clothes. In Marie de France's Bisclaveret, The nobleman confides to his wife that he becomes a wolf only if his garments are hidden. She steals them, and he is trapped in fur. The logic is simple but profound. The clothes are his humanity. In symbolic anthropology, they are a soul skin. Strip them away, and he cannot return. Jacques Le Goff, writing in 1988, described how clothing in medieval thought was not mere fabric but the visible sign of order and identity. To lose it was to lose agency. The same applies to pelts and cloaks in Norse stories. Sigmundr and Sinfjotli's wolfskins do not curse them, they empower them. But once worn, the skin consumes them, nearly driving them to slaughter each other. The symbol is clear. To take the wolfskin is to flirt with the edge of humanity, to court power at the risk of annihilation. Stith Thompson's motif, D671, shapeshifting by donning animal skin, shows how deeply rooted this logic is across Indo-European cultures. Now consider ritual food. At Mount Lykaion, Plato and Pausanias report that tasting human flesh condemned a man to 9 years as a wolf. The symbolism is savage. Eat what is forbidden, and you are cast out of the human order. Archaeological digs in 2014 through 2016 revealed an ash altar used for centuries. Human remains have been debated, but even the suggestion is enough. The wolf here encodes pollution, the idea that some acts make you less than human. What about silver? In our modern imagination, silver bullets are the only weapon that can pierce the werewolf's hide. But this belief is younger than we think. Before the 18th century, iron, prayers, and herbs like rue or wolfsbane were the common defences. Silver rose to prominence because it was civilization's metal incorruptible, resistant to tarnish, associated with purity. Baring Gould in 1865 traced how silver shifted from general amulet against evil to the werewolf's specific bane. By the time of the Beast of Gévaudan in the 1750s, silver bullets were already whispered as the cure. The wolf itself is also symbolic. Across Indo-European myth, the wolf represents outlawry. It is the animal that survives outside the farm, in the forest, under moonlight. To become a wolf is to cross from citizen to exile, from man to outlaw. Geoffrey Cohen in 1996 wrote that the wolf embodied liminality, always at the edge of the village, never fully absent, never fully tamed. Even disease found symbolic form in wolf shape. Rabies spread by bites, causing hydrophobia, aggression, and foaming at the mouth mirrors folkloric werewolf symptoms. Winkler in 1977 suggested rabies outbreaks may have fueled belief in wolfmen. Later, psychiatry coined clinical lycanthropy, describing patients who believed they were wolves. Keck and colleagues documented cases in 1988. Biology, medicine, and myth blurred into one nightmare image. Objects, rituals, metals, animals, diseases, all converge on the same symbolic field, humanity's fragile boundary. What separates us from beasts? A garment, a meal, a skin. A single bite, strip those away, and the wolf waits. But symbols don't stay stable. They shift, mutate, and sometimes harden into misconceptions. Did medieval people really think the full moon triggered transformation? Were silver bullets always the standard? Did Greeks truly sacrifice humans on Mount Lykaion? These are questions scholars still wrestle with. In the next section, we'll step into the debates. We'll separate myth from misbelief, folklore from Hollywood, and ask, what do we really know about werewolves and what have we invented since? The full moon rises. Hollywood tells us this is the trigger that under its glow, men claw out of their skin, bones snapping into lupine form. But here's the truth. The full moon werewolf is mostly a modern invention. Why dwell on these debates? Because separating genuine folklore from later overlays reveals how cultures constantly re-edit their monsters, layering superstition with science, ritual with rumour, cinema with fact. Start with the moon. Medieval sources rarely tie werewolves to lunar cycles. The earliest secure references Ishtar's shepherd, Herodotus's Nuri, Plato's cannibal say nothing about phases of the moon. Geoffrey Scarl's 1993 study notes that the moon trigger crystallized in the 20th century, especially after Universal's The Wolf Man in 1941. Before that, wolves might come by night, but not specifically by moonlight. Silver bullets? They too are younger than often assumed. Hollywood didn't invent them, but they became iconic through film. Earlier records from the 18th and 19th centuries mention silver shot used against witch wolves and beasts like the one in Gévaudan. Baring Gould, writing in 1865, described cases where silver was chosen as the pure metal to combat impurity. But iron nails, charms, prayers, and wolfsbane were also common. To say silver was the only cure flattens centuries of diverse traditions. Human sacrifice at Mount Lykaion remains contested. Pausanias swore it happened, and Plato hinted at it. Excavations by Romano and Voiatsis between 2014 and 2016 did uncover human bones mixed into the ash altar. But archaeologists caution against sensational claims. The remains may be intrusive burials or animal bones misidentified. The debate rages. Did Greeks truly consume human flesh there, or was it always a myth used to mark Arcadia as barbarous? The werewolf-berserker equation is another oversimplification. Popular accounts often say Norse Ulfhevna were literal werewolves. Yet archaeologists and historians like Neil Price in 2002 warn that these were ritual warrior identities, not supernatural transformations. Wolfhood was metaphorical power, not a curse under moonlight. To equate sagas with shape-shifting horror misses their symbolic and martial context. Even the idea that Europe alone had werewolves is misleading. Some writers hastily claim indigenous American werewolves, often conflating them with skinwalker traditions. But Hopi or Navajo shapeshifters occupy wholly different cosmologies, tied to witchcraft and coyote lore. Hopkins in 2012 warns against flattening them into werewolves. They deserve their own categories, not to be crammed into a European mould. Legal records complicate the picture further. In 16th century Germany and France, pamphlets accused men like Peter Stube, executed 1589, and Gilles Garnier burned 1573, of lycanthropy. But were these true beliefs in shape-shifting, or were they sensationalized crimes reframed as diabolic wolfhood? Schulte in 2009 reminds us that confessions came under torture and that famine and war drove villagers to project fears onto wolfmen. These trials were as much about social collapse as monsters. And finally, not all wolves were killers. The infamous beast of Gévaudan in the 1750s was blamed on wolves, but modern scholars like J. Smith in 2011 debate whether it was truly wolf attacks, a serial human predator, or even a hybrid animal. To call it a werewolf says more about villagers' desperation than zoology. So, what do these debates show us? That the werewolf is less a fixed monster than a moving target. Moonlight, silver, sacrifice, berserkers, trials, each was added, questioned, or stripped away in different centuries. What remains constant is the tension, the fear that the line between human and beast can be crossed. But if the werewolf is so malleable, why does it endure? Why does the image of a man caught in fur return again and again for 3,000 years? In the final section, we'll bring it all together, ancient epic, medieval lie, modern cinema, and ask, what is it in us that keeps the wolf alive? The cinema is dark. On screen, a man writhes as his hands stretch, bones crack, and fur bursts through his skin. The audience gasps, not because they believe it, but because something deep in them recognizes it. This is not just Hollywood. This is a 3,000-year-old echo, still hunting. Why does the werewolf endure? Because it's not only a monster, it's a mirror of us. In Mesopotamia, it was punishment for betrayal Ishtar's lover cast out, torn from flock and home. In Greece, it was the horror of ritual pollution, eat the wrong flesh, and you lose your place among humans. In Rome, it was liminality, a soldier urinating a circle by moonlight near the graves of the dead. In medieval France, it was betrayal and marital treachery. In Norse forests, it was chosen fury, wolfskins donned for power. In the Balkans, it was cosmic hunger, swallowing sun and moon. In Iberia, it was cursed bloodlines, the seventh son condemned. Each version fit the fear of its age. That's the secret. The werewolf isn't one story. It is civilization's recurring nightmare about its own boundaries. The wolf stands for exile, hunger, violence, but also freedom. To become a wolf is to be outlaw and predator at once, to taste both terror and power. Modern echoes prove it. In 1941, Universal's The Wolfman codified the silver bullet, the full moon, and the bite curse. In 1981, an American werewolf in London made transformation body horror bones snapping, flesh tearing, the terror of losing control of your own body. Today, fantasy RPGs like Dungeons, Dragons, or The Witcher systematize lycanthropy as a transmissible curse, complete with rules and alignment charts. The werewolf is still evolving, but the skeleton is the same. Even science circles back. Clinical lycanthropy, documented by Keck in 1988, is a psychiatric condition where sufferers believe they are wolves. Rabies, with its foaming mouths and bite-borne transmission, still shadows the legend. Biology provides a parallel to myth, but never erases it. And what about us, sitting here, hearing the howl? We live in cities where wolves have been driven to the margins, yet the story still grips. Because the werewolf encodes something timeless. The fear of losing control of our bodies, our desires, our morality. The fear that under pressure, hunger, betrayal, rage, we might not be as civilized as we pretend. That's why the werewolf is older than most nations, older than most religions still practiced. It is a reminder that deep inside, beneath skin and clothes, beneath ritual and law, there is a shadow waiting. So when you hear a howl in the night, ask yourself, is it only an animal? Or is it the 3,000-year-old story, reminding us that the beast is always at the door? We're only scratching the surface. The next case is even stranger, the 2,700-year-old secret behind the Selkie myth. Subscribe before it drops.